Hi guys, this is Aaron from Rennpart. Today we're going to be installing a third radiator kit on this 996. It's about 90 degrees outside here in June at VIR at our shop. Inside here it's about 68. So this car and all of the 996s that I've ever been in, when it gets hot and you're stuck in traffic or stop and go driving, I noticed the temp gauge likes to climb up, and we have a low temp thermostat in this car, and rarely does it run at that 170 degrees it's supposed to. So we're gonna add some cooling capacity to it, especially for track days. Helps keep everything cooler. The coolant is cooling the engine and the oil. There is a oil to water cooler, so these things can heat soak. So most 996s did not come with the third radiator. We're going to be installing our CSF radiator kit. They do not come stenciled, we did that. And basically it requires draining the coolant, obviously. Then we're gonna remove the front bumper and installing some bracketry and hoses, and then refilling the coolant and testing the system before we put the front bumper back on. That way we don't get to do the same job twice. So stay tuned. This isn't 100% step-by-step guide, but if you have any knowledge on these cars, it's pretty straightforward. So to remove the front bumper, what I like to do is we're gonna remove the wheels and then take out the fender liners. There's a series of clips and Phillips head or hex head, depending on what car you have. Screws, there are 2 screws in here you have to remove, one for the fender liner and then one for the bumper. If you don't do that, it'll get hung up. And then you also want to remove, there's three screws under this plastic trim panel here. So you'll want to remove those. You'll pull these out just like so. They're pretty easy to get out. And there is a Phillips head screw here, and there should also be one here. A lot of cars don't have them, and then one also here. So that's why I take the front wheel liner off. Plus, it just makes it easier. Just take the whole thing off, get it out of the way. And we'll come back in just a minute after we have the front bumper off. Again, if you do have any questions or you run into anything, just feel free to give us a call. We're pretty helpful. But I highly recommend putting a third radiator kit on any of these cars. I think it helps with longevity, especially track use. I would say it's mandatory. With the crazy temperatures we've been seeing here in North Carolina, it's gonna be 95 tomorrow and high humidity. I want everything I can get on this motor. We just built it. I don't want to do that again anytime soon. So we're going to protect our investment and put this third radiator kit in and see how it does. Now that you have your front bumper off, it's a great time, and I would almost say necessary, to take off these ducts for your radiators. You'll find a bunch of junk in there, and we're also gonna just loosen the condenser and clean that out. I already see a ton of stuff. Let me show you the screws that you need to remove to get these off. There is one here, one here, one in here. There's one up there as well. Sorry, it's a little dark. And then there's another one right here. So we're gonna pop those off. You can just push this little sensor out. That's your outdoor temp sensor. This car has electronics, so it has the factory washers. You can delete those if you want and buy the smooth piece. We're not gonna do that on this car, not today at least. But here it is. This is where the third radiator is obviously gonna go. And you can see all of the junk in there. So we'll get it all out and on the floor and make a mess, and we'll proceed with installing this kit. All right, so I just want to show you how much stuff came out of these radiators. This is how important it is to clean these things out. Here's the driver's side. There's the passenger side. I also removed the 2 8mm headed bolts. To get behind them, you can't really scrub these, obviously. You'll mess up the fins, but I will spray them with a water and soap mix and some compressed air to try to get that out. We might try compressed air first. Look at how nasty this is. So this is embarrassing. This is our shop car. We should have done this when we put the new motor in, but here we are. We're gonna get it right. And then look at this. This is also the paint code someone penciled in. This is a paint to sample car. So that's kind of interesting. All right, so after the initial cleaning, we took compressed air and were able to get all of this out. So it's a little addictive because you can continue getting stuff out. They look a whole lot better than what they were, and we'll be adding the third radiator. So after we've cleaned the radiators and have everything looking good up here, we'll want to drain the coolant. The two hoses that we're going to be replacing that allow the third radiator to enter the circuit are the lower side hose on the passenger side, going to the lower portion of the radiator right here. That is where I'm draining from. And then the other hose, which will require the radiator removal on this side, or at least disassembly of the bracket, is going to be the upper hose. So we can get it off here, but the other side is deep in there. And unless you have really small hands, it's just easier to take it off. No point in fighting it. I've also drained the coolant from the back of the car, which is a 5mm Allen. We've already done this right here. And I've taken the cap off so it doesn't have to bubble and drain slowly. So here's how much coolant we've gotten out so far. We're running straight distilled water. This car had intermix, and we obviously rebuilt the motor and had run shout through the line. So I think the foaming, the bubbles you see there, is probably some residual shout. So we do still use a little bit of coolant to help lubricate the system and water wetter. So to recap, this lower hose we should be able to get off and replace, and we're going to start with that. We're going to take this bumper bracket or fender bracket out of the way. It's a 10mm nut down here and a 10mm nut up here, and then these plastic clips come off. We'll get that out of the way. It'll give us access to the spring clamp there. Basically, if you've worked on these cars, you know how those function. And then the front part right here. We'll get that one in and follow up with the next side. So here is the right-hand line. You can tell Porsche part numbers because the first prefix is generally the generation car, 996, 986, 997, etc., 991. Although the new ones, they screwed that up and have gone to a letter and number system. 106 is the area. 106 is water, in this case, to do with the water system. 666 is the part number, and then 56 is the iteration of that part number. So if you look at this third bank of numbers, the 6 even numbers signify they go on the left-hand side of the car. Odd numbers signify they go on the right-hand side of the car. All right, so we have the two hoses in, which I would gather to say is probably the hardest part of this job. So this hose I started with is probably the easier one to do. I left the radiator in place. I did not remove it. You can sneak your hand up through here to access this hose. I have decent sized hands and can fit it up in there to slip it over the pipe here. I did take this bar out of the way. We got it back in there, put a hose clamp on that. It came with a spring clamp originally. So that hose is done. You want to route the third radiator hose closest to the tub. Just remember that. And we'll leave that hanging there. This radiator, it's just so much, I would say you need to take it out. There's 3 fasteners. There's a nut, 2 bolts on the bottom. Pull it out. I took the bar bracket out here too. and that is what I would recommend. We got that in, so we're gonna bolt this back together. Now we'll be installing this hardware. Some of it goes on the car, and then some of it goes on the new pieces that are gonna hold the third radiator in. So you'll take these 4 spring clips, and these will go on the chassis. They'll go, one will go here, and then one will go here, and then one will go up here. I have this bar in, this is just showing you how it goes. One will go in that slot, and one will go in that slot. And basically, the bolts will bolt this bracket in. This is the upper portion. And then there's a lower portion that will get bolted in, and the radiator is sandwiched in between. There are some rubber grommets that go in this hole on that peg, essentially. And then this will be bolted together. All right, so after you get the hoses in, the next step is to put these 2 brackets that are gonna hold the radiator in place around the radiator so we can mount that. There's a top and a bottom piece. The top of the radiator is where the coolant outlets are. And the top piece has these tangs that point in, and the bottom piece does not, and they're inside. You basically put 2 nut catches on either side of this, encase the radiator, and then tighten the bolts. So then you need to insert these nutserts on the chassis. There's 4 of them. One there, one there, one up here, and one here. You can see our coolant hoses are hanging out. We'll probably put some hose clamps on those and get those attached. I like to use a little bit of soapy water on the hoses to make them easy to go on, and we'll tighten those up, and then we'll pressure test the system. Radiator is in and everything is mounted up. We're gonna pressure test it next with our vacuum fill system. One thing to note is this line comes out, stays flat, and then goes down and through here. You'll have to see which routing is the best for you to have minimum rubbing. Everything looks good. We're gonna finish up a few more little things here on the front end. We got to put the crossbar in on the other side, pressure test the system, fill it up, and then put the front bumper back on. All right, so here we are at the engine compartment. I use an airlift system. It fits great in here. The cheap Amazon ones don't tend to fit with this wing on the 996 at least. So I get the genuine airlift unit, and we did an oil change too. That's why the oil cap is off. You have to take the snorkel off. That piece just pops out. We pulled a vacuum on the system. You can see this is a new airlift. I've had a few of them. And I just want to make sure it's holding. I usually give it 10 minutes or so, make sure it didn't drop. And then this is pretty cool. So I've got the hose, the pickup tube down here in a bucket. And basically, if I can get that to stay, we're gonna let it rip. One thing, before I do that, you can see all the coolant hoses are sucked flat. There's still some coolant in the system. Perfect vacuum would be 30 PSI, but 27.5 is pretty good. So if we go look at all the coolant hoses, everything's sucked flat. So check this out. All right, so we've opened the valve and we're sucking in coolant now. So I put about 4 gallons in this bucket. I think I got maybe 3 out. I'll let you guys know how much it is. There's some engine ice in there too. That's why it's pink. Although you would, in a street car, you would use antifreeze 50-50 mix, depending on your climate, of course. So we'll let it suck this down and then go put the front bumper back on, and then we'll see how much cooler the car runs. Before you put the bumper back on, you do need to put this air guide in place. It points down and it slides in. It has some nubs on it to hold itself in. There's 3 nubs on the bottom, which you can pull on this to get those nubs to go into place. And there's a couple nubs on top. Once that's in, put the bumper on, followed by the wheel arches. There is one important step that you also need to do, that's the old trim for the bumper that had the third radiator part blocked off, and here's the new one. I'm kind of glad I'm replacing this because that one was pretty faded, and if you look closely you could see it. So basically you're just going to pry on these tabs. Here, I'll show you. So there's tabs inside the bumper. You take a flat screwdriver, put it between there, work your way around and pop out the old one. The new one just snaps into place. So after installing the third radiator kit, I've driven the car. I probably put another 300-400 miles on it in this really hot weather. One thing I noticed is it's not climbing above the low temp thermostat range, which is about 170, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And on the highway, it stays down at that range. When you stop at stoplights or if you're in stop and go traffic, it will climb up, but much slower than it did before. Before, it would just run well into the 180, 195, 200 range. So I would say this kit and cleaning the radiators is a huge plus just for even regular driving. We will be taking the car on track to test really everything before we go to our hill climb next week. So we'll see how hot it gets on track. I'm really concerned about oil temperature. As the oil gets hotter, it thins out and doesn't do its job as well. So hopefully by adding this kit and a few of the other modifications we've done, this will help keep the car cool. I am not expecting this car to be able to run 2-hour sessions in 100-degree ambient heat, but I would like to have the peace of mind for some light track days, 20-minute sessions, to keep everything running cool so we can keep that oil pressure up and make this motor last a long time. So we'll be testing it next week. We'll post some videos on track and maybe give some feedback. So we'll see how it goes, and we're looking forward to doing our hill climb, which, who knows? I don't know how hot the car is going to get. It is about 1,000-foot climb over the course of, I think it's just under 2 miles. So I would expect it's going to build some heat, but hopefully nothing insane. So I guess I'll find out. Let you guys know. Thanks for watching.